I wasn't supposed to walk into an empty house on Thanksgiving morning. I wasn't supposed to hear my own footsteps echoing in silence. I wasn't supposed to feel my stomach drop before I even reached the kitchen counter. But life has a way of showing you the truth in the quiet moments you never think to fear. When I opened the door, the air inside felt wrong, cold, untouched, like no one had lived there for days. My arms were full of grocery bags and wrapped gifts, and I remember thinking how excited I'd been on the drive over, humming along to a playlist Brady and I used to love. That happiness evaporated the second I realized the living room was empty. No voices. No laughter. No holiday music. No smell of anything cooking. Just one person. His stepfather. Victor sat in an old rocking chair near the window, motionless except for the slow, deliberate movement of the chair beneath him. His eyes were closed, his hands folded neatly across his stomach. For a moment, I really thought he was asleep. Then I saw the note. A small piece of paper taped to the refrigerator door. The handwriting was Brady's, quick, careless, familiar. My hands shook as I tore it down. Gone on a Caribbean cruise with Hannah. Mom needed a break so she joined us. You'll stay home and watch Victor. He needs you. Back Monday. Brady. I stared at the words until they blurred. They didn't make sense at first, like my brain refused to process the message. I read it again. And again. Each time, the meaning hit harder. They were gone. Gone. With Hannah. The coworker Brady swore was just a friend. The woman I knew deep down wasn't just a friend at all. You look like someone just stole your wallet, a voice rasped from behind me. I whipped around. Victor hadn't moved anything except his eyes, now open, bright, too knowing for the frail old man Brady always described. He watched me like he'd been waiting for exactly this moment. He isn't coming back till Monday, is he? He asked, focusing on me with unsettling clarity. No, I whispered, struggling to steady my voice. No one is. They've all left. Victor nodded slowly, as though this confirmed a suspicion he'd carried for far too long. Left you holding the mess they made. Figures. Typical Brady. I lowered myself into a chair, the notes still crumpled in my hand. The room suddenly felt too big, too empty, too cold. The reality settled in my chest like a weight I couldn't lift. Brady and I had spent weeks talking about Thanksgiving. His mother was supposed to host. His sister was bringing her kids. Victor would sit in his rocker and tell one of his old stories about the time he worked in finance during the boom years. It was supposed to be the one holiday where we were all together. My first Thanksgiving as part of the family. Except apparently, I wasn't part of anything. I tried calling Brady. His phone went straight to voicemail, just like the last 3 attempts I'd made on the drive. I tried his mother. Same thing. His sister. No luck. Victor pushed himself up from the chair, leaning heavily on his cane. You want water? He asked, shuffling toward the kitchen. Been quiet as a cemetery all week. They left Tuesday morning. Tuesday? I echoed. They left, on Tuesday? He nodded, pulling a pitcher of water from the fridge. His hands trembled slightly, but his movements were deliberate. Didn't bother stocking the fridge before running off either. Hope you brought groceries. I hadn't. Of course I hadn't. I brought ingredients for pies. Sweet potatoes. Cranberries. Things that add flavor to a family meal, not the entire meal itself. I hadn't expected to be abandoned. I hadn't expected to be the caregiver Brady tossed into place like a substitute teacher. My phone buzzed and hope surged through me, maybe a message from Brady explaining everything. But no. An Instagram notification. I opened it, and the world as I knew it snapped in half. There he was. Brady. My husband. Standing on a cruise ship deck with his arm wrapped around Hannah, the same blonde coworker he'd been helping with a project for months. They were smiling at each other like they were the couple. Like they were on vacation celebrating new love. They held champagne glasses. The caption read, #New Beginnings Caribbean Getaway with at Brady Mitchell and Family. Family. The word hit harder than any betrayal I'd ever imagined. My breath caught in my throat. I scrolled, unable to stop myself. Each photo was a punch. Brady's mother, lounging with a cocktail. Brady and Hannah at a candlelit table. Brady laughing with his sister, who'd captioned her own post with heart emojis. 2 days ago. 2 days ago. Meaning the cruise wasn't spontaneous. Meaning the trip wasn't last minute. Meaning that while I was buying gifts and prepping recipes, Brady was planning a romantic escape, without me. They've been seeing each other a while, Victor said gently, as though the truth should be spoken softly. She's called here. Left messages. Sweet voice. Annoying laugh. I lifted my gaze. You knew. He shrugged. I pay attention. They think I'm too old to notice much. But this, he tapped his temple, still works better than they'd like. Something ugly twisted inside me, hurt, betrayal, embarrassment, anger so sharp I could taste it. Then another fear struck me. Money. I opened our banking app, dread rising like a tide. Within seconds, I saw it. A withdrawal. $5,200. Nearly our entire savings. Gone. Money we had been saving for a down payment. Money left to me by my father. Money we'd agreed we wouldn't touch. He took it, I whispered. He took all of it. Victor wasn't shocked. They've been draining my accounts for years. For your care, Victor, they say. But half the time the heat's turned down and my meds arrive late. Meanwhile Elaine comes home with another fancy purse. My stomach churned. This wasn't negligence. This wasn't an accident. This was systematic. It wasn't just me they'd deceived. It was him too. My phone rang then, my best friend, calling to wish me a happy Thanksgiving. I couldn't answer. Not yet. Not when I didn't even know who I was to this family anymore. Victor lifted a pot lid on the stove. Inside was a small amount of soup. Not exactly a feast, he said. But it's all they left me. No, I said abruptly. No. We're not eating that. His eyebrows rose a little. We're going to have a proper Thanksgiving, I said firmly. Turkey. Potatoes. Everything. I'm not letting them take this day from us too. Victor stared at me for a long moment, then, slowly, smiled. Haven't had a real home-cooked meal in months, he murmured. Fast food is all Brady brings when he remembers I'm alive. I grabbed my purse. Then we're fixing that. At the grocery store, as I pushed the cart through crowded aisles, my chest felt tight, not from panic, but from clarity. For the first time in years, my vision wasn't clouded by wanting to make Brady happy. I wasn't smoothing rough edges or excusing bad behavior. I was seeing things as they were. When I returned home, Victor was sitting at the table with a stack of papers spread in front of him, papers that didn't look like junk mail or receipts. What's all this? I asked. He tapped the documents with a finger. Truth, he said simply. And proof. I stepped closer and felt the world tilt. Bank statements. Medical notes. Lists of missed medications. A detailed log of neglect. Dates. Times. Incidents. Every cruelty. Every lie. Victor, I breathed. You've been keeping track? For months, he said. Maybe years. Why show me? Because you deserved better, he said. And because I don't have much time left. He slid a medical report toward me. The bold letters made my heart sink. Terminal. 3 months. Maybe less. My breath caught. Victor. I'm so sorry. Don't apologize, he said quietly. Help me make things right. He opened a drawer and pulled out an envelope, setting it in front of me with deliberate care. My real will, he said. Not the fake one Brady and Elaine think they'll get to benefit from. I stared at the envelope with his name on it. Victor met my eyes with a strength that hadn't faded one bit. Shall we begin? For a long moment, I couldn't move. The envelope sat between us like a loaded question, one that could change everything I thought I knew about the Mitchell family. About my marriage. About myself. Victor waited, expression steady but tired, the kind of tired that settles not in the body, but in the soul. The kind that comes from watching people you once loved become strangers. Finally, I pulled the envelope toward me. You're serious? I asked, barely above a whisper. As serious as dying gets, Victor replied, letting out a slow exhale. Brady thinks he's inheriting everything. Elaine thinks she's entitled to whatever she wants because she married me. Melissa will pretend she never saw the red flags. But you? He pointed at me with that thin, trembling finger. You showed up. They didn't. I swallowed hard. What do you want from me? Help, he said simply. Not the kind they expect. Not the kind they want. The kind they deserve. He pushed himself slowly out of the chair, leaning on his cane as he shuffled toward a small room I hadn't noticed before. Come on, he called over his shoulder. There's more. I followed him down the hall to what used to be an office but had since been turned into an improvised bedroom, hospital bed in one corner, regular twin in the other. Victor sat on the edge of the twin bed and gestured toward the hospital-style space. I don't use that, he said, motioning at the adjustable bed. Makes me feel like a corpse waiting for paperwork. Inside the desk drawer, he pulled out a thick file labeled medical and handed it to me. When I opened it, I felt my stomach knot. Reports. Scans. Notes. Lab results. Diagnoses. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. Terminal. The words looked too heavy for the paper they were printed on. 2 months left, Victor said, voice level but quiet. Maybe less now. I closed the folder gently, as though any harsh movement could shatter him further. Brady knew? Oh, they all knew, Victor said, waving a hand. Elaine sat next to me when the doctor gave the news. 2 days later she was already talking about a vacation. Caretaking is exhausting, she said. Exhausting. He snorted. She napped more than I did. The cruelty hit with a physical force. They left you alone knowing this? Better to leave me than deal with me, Victor replied softly. He nodded toward the bathroom. Check the medicine cabinet. I hesitated, unsure if I wanted to see what I suspected was coming. But I went. Inside were half-empty pill bottles, outdated prescriptions, enzyme supplements nearly gone even though they had been filled just a week ago. When I came back, Victor didn't even ask. They've been cutting doses, he said. Half the pain meds. Half the enzymes. Said it would stretch the budget. His lips curled into a bitter almost smile. Hard to afford medication when you're buying designer handbags and cruise tickets. My chest tightened. This is abuse. It's neglect, Victor corrected. Sometimes negligence is louder than violence. He pulled a small notebook from under his pillow, pages filled with cramped handwriting. My log, he said. Dates. Missed doses. Cold nights. Money they took from my accounts. He flipped to a page halfway through the book. When Brady came over 3 weeks ago, he dropped off fries, half-eaten, forgot my medications, and left after 15 minutes. Had a meeting, he said. I thought of the photos on the cruise ship, Brady laughing with Hannah as though he didn't have a dying stepfather or a wife waiting at home with a pie recipe. Victor looked at me, reading my thoughts. He hasn't cared about anyone but himself for years, he said. Except maybe you. But even then, he cared more about what you could give him. My throat tightened. I don't know what to say. Say you'll help me, Victor said. Because time is short. And I'd rather spend my last days fighting back than waiting to die. He slid the envelope back toward me, his eyes clear and determined. Will you help me? I didn't realize I'd started crying until a tear hit the folder in my lap. I wiped it away and whispered, yes. Victor smiled, small, tired, but real. Good. Then let's get to work. He stood, slower than before, his hand gripping the cane tightly. Before anything else, you need to know what we're dealing with. He motioned for me to follow him into the study, a room that had once been his sanctuary but had been stripped down by Elaine's decorating instincts. She'd turned it into a shallow meditation space, complete with candles and inspirational quotes she'd never followed herself. Victor pointed toward a landscape painting on the wall. Help me with that. I lifted the frame and saw a loose wooden panel behind it. Victor pushed gently on the right corner until it clicked open. Inside was a waterproof case, locked with a tiny gold key that Victor pulled from his shirt pocket. My real assets, he said. Inside the case were folders, deeds, investment statements, and documents I didn't fully understand, but the sheer amount of them made my breath catch. $3 million. Real estate. International accounts. Trusts. A Vermont property. 2 retirement portfolios. Private investments. I stared at the paperwork in disbelief. This can't be real, I murmured. It is, Victor said. And none of them know. He leaned on the desk with both hands. That house they think they're inheriting. Not in my name. Never was. They can pack their things if they want, but they'll be packing into someone else's property. I blinked, stunned. Why hide all this? Victor's smile was cold. Because I knew exactly who I married. And exactly who Brady became. I swallowed hard. And you're giving this to me? I'm giving you justice, he corrected. And giving them nothing. My voice trembled. Victor, why me? Because you saw me, he said simply. You cared. You made me Thanksgiving dinner when my own family left me to rot. And because you deserve a fresh start after what that boy put you through. I didn't know what to say. Gratitude felt too small. Anger too sharp. Sorrow too deep. Victor tapped the top of the document case. We protect each other now, he whispered. You help me finish this. And I make sure you walk away from this family with everything they tried to take. I nodded. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I wanted truth. All right, I whispered. Tell me what we do next. Victor sat back in his chair, eyes gleaming with a fierce, fading fire. Now, he said, we begin. The next hours blurred into a storm of planning. Victor talked me through everything, his medical history, the lies, the verbal abuse, the financial exploitation. He knew exactly what evidence we needed and exactly how to document it. His mind was sharper than anyone in his family realized. We spent the rest of the afternoon sorting his logs, photographing prescriptions, organizing bank statements, and arranging everything by date. I created digital files, spreadsheets, and labeled folders with a precision I didn't know I possessed. At one point, Victor paused and studied me quietly. You're calmer than I expected, he murmured. I think I'm done crying, I said softly. I think I'm waking up. Victor nodded. Good. Because tomorrow, the real work starts. It was late when I finally cooked dinner, nothing fancy, just roasted turkey breast, mashed potatoes, and green beans. But Victor looked at the plate as though it were a gourmet feast. No one has cooked for me like this in years, he said quietly. Then tonight is the first of many, I replied. We ate in silence, comfortable and warm, something I'd forgotten was possible. After cleaning up, I helped Victor back to his room. He sat on the edge of the bed, breathing a little heavier than before. When did you stop loving him? He asked suddenly. I froze. I don't know, I whispered. I think I loved the man I thought he was. Not the man he became. Or maybe, Victor said gently, you just stopped pretending that his crumbs were meals. I didn't reply. He didn't need me to. When I turned off the light and stepped into the hallway, I thought about everything Victor had shown me. And for the first time, the truth didn't break me. It strengthened me. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter. One Brady wasn't prepared for. I woke up the next morning with a strange kind of clarity, like someone had wiped fog off a mirror I didn't realize was clouded. Victor was already awake when I checked on him, sitting at the small kitchen table with his notebook open and a mug of tea warming his hands. You sleep at all? He asked without looking up. A little. I wasn't sure if that counted as truth or self-preservation. We've got a lot to cover today, he said, flipping to a fresh page. You ready? As ready as someone could be when dismantling an entire family's empire. I brewed myself some coffee and joined him at the table. The house was still cold, the thermostat had been set to 59 degrees, something Victor said Elaine did during the nights to save money. I bumped it up to 70, just to reclaim a small sense of control. Victor glanced at the rising temperature on the thermostat and sighed. Feels like a luxury after the last few months. It shouldn't be a luxury, I muttered. It should be basic. That's why we're doing this, he murmured. People forget the basics when they stop seeing you as human. We went through the plan again, step by step. According to Victor, we needed 3 pillars of evidence: medical neglect, financial exploitation, and abandonment. Everything had to be airtight, solid enough that even if Brady tried to challenge Victor's will, the courts wouldn't touch it. As I listened to him explain what we'd need, I realized something unexpected. Victor wasn't doing this just for himself. He was doing it for every older person who had been shoved to the side, every spouse forgotten when things got inconvenient, every person treated like a burden instead of a human being. He was doing it for me, too. Around mid-morning, Victor suggested we reach out to Patricia, his attorney. He said she needed to know that he'd changed his mind about certain aspects of his estate, but more importantly, he trusted her. I've worked with her for years, he told me. She's blunt and terrifying, but honest. That made me feel strangely relieved. Before we called her, though, there was someone else we needed, someone Victor said had a knack for medical appearances and a discreet business dealing with props used in medical training. Patricia's brother. He supplies simulation devices for hospitals, Victor explained. Mannequins, monitors, props for medical students to practice on. He owes me a favor. I wasn't sure what I expected. A man with a briefcase of fake medical supplies wasn't on the list, but when James arrived in an unmarked van that afternoon, what he unloaded changed everything. Looks real, doesn't have to function, James said, pulling out oxygen tanks, monitoring screens, empty prescription bottles with authentic-looking labels. Never thought I'd be setting a stage in a private home, but here we are. Victor smiled faintly. Life is full of firsts. I helped James carry the props to Victor's bedroom. We transformed the space with eerie efficiency. The oxygen tank was set near the bed with tubing draped realistically. The monitors sat on the table, quietly blinking with simulated readings. A few used-looking vials and empty injection boxes lay carefully placed on a tray. When I stepped back, the room looked like the setup of a man who needed constant care. A man who had not received that care. This'll do, Victor said softly. This'll do just fine. I took a series of photographs while Victor coached me on angles and lighting. Sidelight from the window deepened the shadows around his face, making him appear friendlier than he was. Removing his glasses created a hollow look around his eyes. A touch of powder dimmed the color from his cheeks. The results were alarming, even knowing it was staged. The images unsettled me. "Oh, that's good," Victor said approvingly. "They'll regret staying on that damn cruise." Next, Victor insisted on photographing me. I protested, but he shook his head. "You're part of the story now," he said. "They need to see what you look like taking care of me alone." He wasn't wrong. I let my hair fall naturally, no makeup, dark circles visible under my eyes. I draped a blanket over my lap and slouched in a chair by the bed. Victor instructed me to look exhausted, worried, overwhelmed. It wasn't difficult, I didn't even have to pretend. He captured several photos, me holding his medications, adjusting a blanket, dozing in the chair. When we reviewed them, I barely recognized myself. "You look like you've been caring for a dying man," Victor said gently. "Which, let's be honest, you have been." We saved everything to a secure drive and printed copies for the physical record. Around 4 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. "How's Uncle Victor doing? Any updates?" Victor chuckled darkly. Hook, line, and sinker. Time to reel her in. I typed a message that felt like it belonged in a script. He had a rough night. Fever spiked. Breathing issues. Doing everything I can. Within a minute. Oh no. Are you sure he'll be okay till Monday? Victor's eyebrows lifted. Not, should I come home? Not, does he need a doctor? They really are who I thought they were. Following Victor's cue, I replied. Hard to say. He keeps asking for Brady. Melissa responded. I'll tell him when they get back from the shore excursion. I read the message aloud. Victor shook his head slowly. They're waiting for me to die at their convenience. I didn't have words, not ones that wouldn't break me. That evening, I cooked again, nothing extravagant, but warm and comforting. As we sat together, Victor asked me questions I'd avoided for months. What was the first sign? It took me a moment to realize he meant Brady. When my father died, I finally said. He left me some money. I wanted to put it in a separate account, but Brady insisted we combine it for the future. Victor nodded knowingly. Joint accounts, the easiest way to siphon money. And when I wanted to keep my studio space, he said it wasn't a smart financial choice. That I should just work from home to save money. But after that, I trailed off. He isolated you, Victor finished. Quietly. Methodically. I let out a breath. I feel stupid for not seeing it. Victor reached across the table and laid his hand over mine. Being loved blinds you, he said. Being used opens your eyes. He squeezed my hand lightly. And now you're wide awake. It was the first time in months I didn't feel shame when talking about Brady. After dinner, Victor asked me to help him with something he called the contingency plan. He led me back to his study, where he pulled a mediocre landscape painting from the wall to reveal a hidden panel. Inside was a watertight document case. These, he said, spreading the documents across the desk, are assets they don't know about. Assets they'll never touch. My breath hitched as I looked at the stacks of financial statements. There's so much, I whispered. 3 million, he said matter-of-factly. Real estate. Investments. Trusts. Offshore accounts. He paused, reading my reaction. I'm not telling you this to impress you. I'm telling you this because it'll be yours to manage. I stared at him. Why me? Because you stood by me when my own family didn't, he said. Because they left me to die with nothing, not even a warm meal. And because you've shown more heart in 2 days than they have in years. My throat tightened. Victor. He waved away the sentiment like he couldn't afford tenderness too often. It's settled. He slid over a different envelope, thin, elegant, stamped with a notary seal. That, he said, is my real will. I didn't open it. Not yet. Victor yawned, exhausted not just from our work but from the weight of everything he'd been carrying alone. You should rest, I whispered. No, he said, eyes sharpening for a moment. One more thing. He reached beneath a stack of papers and withdrew a photograph, Victor as a young man, with his first wife Martha. They were smiling, standing in front of a lake, sunlight reflecting off the water behind them. Martha's arms were wrapped around Victor, and he was beaming, alive in a way I'd never seen. She was my beginning, he said softly. And you're helping me with my ending. I blinked rapidly, swallowing back emotion. I won't let them take your ending from you, I whispered. Victor nodded, satisfied. That's why I chose you. We cleaned up the documents and helped him back to his room. By the time I tucked him in, his breathing had evened out, and his eyes fluttered peacefully. Wake me if you need anything, I said. I won't, he murmured. But thank you for offering. When I finally lay down in the guest room, exhaustion pulled at me, but underneath it was purpose, fierce and undeniable. Tomorrow would be another step in building the truth. And Brady had no idea what was coming. Sunday morning arrived wrapped in a quiet that didn't feel peaceful. It felt heavy, like the house itself understood that time was running out. When I walked into Victor's room with his tea, I noticed immediately that something had shifted. His hands trembled more than yesterday. A faint bluish tint shadowed the edges of his lips, and his breathing had a rasp I hadn't heard before. You don't have to pretend with me, I whispered, helping him sit upright against his pillows. You're not doing well today, are you? Victor gave a small, humorless smile. It's funny. All the acting we did, the makeup, the lighting, and now the real thing sneaks in without an invitation. I wanted to say something comforting, but the truth pressed against my ribs and made it hard to breathe. Instead, I reached for my phone and called Diane, the hospice nurse who had been visiting him weekly before the family left. When I explained his symptoms, her voice softened. I'll come by this afternoon. Until then, just keep him comfortable. It sounds like he's entering the final stage. The final stage. A phrase that shouldn't have surprised me but still found a way to hurt. After I hung up, Victor patted the space beside him on the bed, inviting me to sit. No more pretending, he said quietly. Not between us. I nodded. No more. He exhaled slowly. Before anything happens, we need to finish this. I don't want to leave loose ends they can twist or manipulate when I'm gone. He motioned for me to retrieve the folder Patricia had left and place it on his lap. Every movement cost him energy. The weakness in his arms. The trembling fingers. The faint wince he tried to hide. None of it was staged anymore. This is the last of it, he said, voice thin. And it needs to be perfect. We spent the next few hours reviewing everything, the timeline of neglect, the bank records, the documentation of every medical appointment they canceled, every dollar they siphoned, every moment they pretended he wasn't dying. When the pain became too much, he closed his eyes and whispered, "Read it to me. I want to hear it all one more time. Not for doubt. For closure." So I read. And he listened with a stillness that felt sacred. By the time Diane arrived that afternoon, the house felt different, as if it were holding its breath. She examined Victor carefully, then stepped into the hallway with me. Her expression carried the kind of gentle gravity that comes from years of delivering hard truths. It's happening faster than we expected, she said softly. He may have hours. Maybe a day. Make him comfortable. Be with him. That's all he needs now. Part of me wanted to call Brady, if only to prove to myself that I'd done the right thing. But when I looked into Victor's eyes as I re-entered his room, I knew he didn't want them here, not now, not at the end. They made their choice, he said before I could speak. Let them live with it. I gave a quiet nod. After Diane left, Victor asked for something surprising. Peaches, he whispered. Fresh peaches and cream. My Martha used to make them every Sunday. It took 3 grocery stores and a frantic search through overpriced organic bins, but I found them. I prepared them exactly how he described, thin slices, a drizzle of real cream, a dash of sugar he insisted on even though he shouldn't have any. When he tasted them, his eyes watered. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked not like a dying man, but a man remembering a life he once loved. No one has made these for me since she died, he murmured. We spent the rest of the day in a strange, delicate rhythm. I read to him from the detective novel he had been rereading for years. We listened to soft classical music. Sometimes he talked about Martha. Sometimes he was quiet. Sometimes he drifted in and out, whispering half-formed memories. At one point, he woke suddenly and said, "Call Patricia. It's time." She arrived within an hour, bringing with her a notary with a kind face and solemn eyes. Despite his weakened state, Victor insisted on sitting up straight. "We'll do this properly," he said. They went over his will one final time. He initialed every page with slow, shaky strokes. He re-signed the medical directives. He confirmed the transfer of assets. Everything was recorded, witnessed, notarized. Then Patricia opened her tablet. "Whenever you're ready to record your final message." Victor inhaled deeply, gathering whatever strength he had left. When the recording began, his voice was quiet but unmistakably lucid. "To those who thought I wouldn't notice," he said, looking straight into the camera, "I did." He spoke of years of being disregarded, of hearing the things they whispered, of being treated not as family but as a burden waiting to be relieved. Not with anger. Not with bitterness. With clarity. "It wasn't illness that hurt me," he said softly. "It was the realization that the people I loved believed I was disposable." Patricia wiped a tear discreetly. The notary swallowed a lump in his throat. I couldn't breathe. Victor ended the recording with a final look into the lens and one quiet truth. "She cared for me when you chose not to. And that is why she inherits what you abandoned." When the recording stopped, Victor slumped slightly, exhausted. Patricia placed her hand over his gently. "We'll make sure everything is protected," she promised. After they left, Victor asked for something I didn't expect. "The port," he whispered. "In the study. Behind the dusty textbooks." It took some searching, but I found it, a deep burgundy bottle, unopened, labeled with a year older than me. "We saved it for our 50th anniversary," he said when I poured 2 small glasses. We never got there. We sat in the living room, him in his favorite chair, me beside him. Outside, the world turned dark. Inside, time stopped. "To justice," Victor said, lifting his glass with trembling fingers. "To dignity," I replied, touching mine lightly to his. We drank. We talked. We sat in long silences. Around midnight, his breathing shifted, shallower, slower, softer. He drifted in and out, his head leaning slightly to one side. I kept reading aloud, even when I wasn't sure he was still listening. The detective story continued until my own voice began to crack. Then, without any drama, without fear, without struggle, Victor's hand relaxed in mine. His chest rose once more, then stilled. He was gone. For a long time, I didn't move. The world felt unreal, like I'd stepped out of it and into a space where grief and gratitude lived side by side. Eventually, tears found me. Soft. Silent. Steady. Not because he died. Because he didn't die alone. When the funeral home came at dawn, I stood in the hallway, clutching the edges of my sweater as two men carried him away. The house felt impossibly empty. But it was only the beginning. They were coming home soon. And nothing on earth could prepare them for what awaited. Monday morning arrived quietly, almost too quietly for what was about to unfold. I showered, dressed in the simple black dress I'd bought the day before, and tied my hair back. I cleaned the house, not because it needed it, but because I needed something to do with my hands. The silence pressed in from every corner, a reminder that Victor was gone and that his absence had weight. By mid-morning, everything was ready. His letter sat on the coffee table, propped up against the family's framed photograph. The documents were laid out in the dining room in perfect order. The video testimony was cued on the TV, paused at the first frame. The printed cruise photos lay beside my suitcase, each time-stamped, each one a contrast between sun-drenched laughter and the darkness they abandoned here at home. And then, waiting. The clock ticked. The house settled. Outside, a car passed by. Inside, my pulse sounded like a second heartbeat. Around noon, I heard the crunch of tires in the driveway. Then doors slamming. Voices. Laughter. Laughter. It was the sound of a family returning from vacation, unaware that everything they knew was seconds from collapse. I steadied my breath and positioned myself beside Victor's empty rocking chair. My palms were cold, but I kept them relaxed at my sides. The front door swung open with the cheerful force of people who believe they're walking back into their normal life. "We're home!" Brady called out, dragging a suitcase in behind him. His mother, Elaine, bustled past him with a duty-free bag full of perfume and scarves. "Jade, you're still here? Did Victor sleep in? He usually wakes up early, even when he's feeling." She froze when she saw my expression. Brady's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing. "What's with the black dress?" Hannah, who lingered behind them, looked between the three of us, sensing something was wrong but not sure what. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't cry. Didn't shake. Victor passed away Saturday night. The silence that followed wasn't grief. It was shock. Panic. Fear. Guilt. And something else darker, a dawning understanding that their absence had consequences. Brady dropped the shopping bags in his hands. The sound echoed through the entryway. "Wait, what?" He was fine when we left." "Jade, what do you mean?" "He died peacefully," I said. "Around midnight." Elaine stepped forward, indignant. "And why on earth did you not call us?" "I did," I replied calmly. "Repeatedly. You didn't answer." I added, picking up a sheet of paper from the console table, sent photos of his condition to Melissa. She responded. "You didn't." Melissa swallowed, her face turning a shade paler than her sunburn. "I told them," she whispered. "I said he looked bad." Brady wheeled on her. "You didn't tell me it was serious." "I showed you." "You were too busy at the karaoke bar." The chaos simmered, but I held up the envelope in my hand. "Before anything else, you should read this." It took a long moment for someone to move. Finally, Brady snatched the envelope from my fingers like he thought he could control the narrative by sheer force. He unfolded the letter. He read the first line. And his face drained of every ounce of color. As he read aloud, Victor's words filled the quiet house. He spoke of being alone on holidays while they vacationed. He spoke of overhearing their comments about waiting for him to finally go. He spoke of excuses about money, excuses about time, excuses about care. He spoke of the deep hurt that came not from dying, but from being invisible to those who should have loved him. And then he wrote something that made Elaine stagger backward, gripping the side of the table for support. "I leave this world knowing that Jade, a stranger who owed me nothing, showed me more dignity in 4 days than my family did in 4 years. When the letter ended, no one spoke. Not even Elaine. I stepped forward and gestured to the dining room. There's more you need to see. They followed, hesitant now, uncertain. For the first time, I held the power in this house. The dining table was covered in carefully arranged folders. Financial exploitation. Medical neglect. Abandonment. Mismanaged medications. Cancelled appointments. Statements from neighbors who had noticed the decline. Notes written in Victor's own hand. "This is fake," Brady snapped, grabbing one of the folders. "You made this isn't." "Really?" I asked softly. "Then watch this." I pressed play on the television. Victor appeared on screen, frail, yes, but lucid, steady, and heartbreakingly resolute. "Brady," his recorded voice said, looking straight into the camera, "I know what you have done. I know what you haven't done. I know every time you ignored me, every time you spoke about me as a burden, every time you treated my life like an inconvenience." Elaine sunk into a chair as if her legs could no longer hold her. Hannah took a small step backward, her breath trembling. Victor continued, voice soft but cutting. "You will say I was confused. You will say I was manipulated. You will say this isn't what I wanted." He paused. But then, in a moment so powerful it felt like the air crackled, he said, "This was my choice." Brady stumbled backward, knocking into the wall behind him. No. No, this can't, he wasn't. A knock sounded at the door. The timing was perfect. Patricia walked in, followed by the notary. She carried a locked briefcase. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor like punctuation. "Good afternoon," she said calmly. "I understand you've just returned." Elaine shot to her feet. Tell all of them, that this is illegal." He was old. He was confused. He didn't know what he was signing. Patricia opened the briefcase and removed the final will. "Mr. Harmon was evaluated by 2 independent physicians," she said sharply. "He was mentally competent. The will is valid. And binding." She turned to me. "Jade, would you like to do the honors?" I nodded. They watched me with wide eyes, the fear, confusion, desperation blending into one. I read the key line aloud. "Victor Harmon leaves the entirety of his estate to Jade Mitchell." Elaine shrieked. Hannah gasped. Melissa covered her mouth. Brady's knees nearly buckled. I continued. "With additional provisions for charitable contributions to elder abuse prevention organizations." Elaine swayed, looking as though she might faint. "He can't do that. We're his family." Patricia didn't blink. "The will specifically cites abandonment and neglect as the reason for your disinheritance." Brady lunged forward. "This is lies. We took care of him." I gestured toward the evidence on the table. "Really?" Patricia added, "Additionally, the home you currently occupy belongs to the Harmon Family Trust, not to you. Jade is now trustee." Elaine blinked rapidly. "You mean this girl, owns our house?" "No," Patricia corrected. "She controls it. You own none of it." When the weight of that hit them, the room seemed to tilt. Brady stepped toward me then, pleading now, desperate. "Jade, come on. We can fix this. Please. Look, I messed up." Hannah meant nothing. "The money, look," I panicked. "I made mistakes. We can get through this." "You left your dying stepfather alone," I said quietly. "And you left your wife behind without a second thought." "We can start over," he whispered, reaching for my arm. "Just don't do this." I slipped my arm away and placed my wedding ring in his palm. You ended us long before Victor did, I said. This just made it official. He stared at the ring like it was a foreign object. Then his expression twisted, darkening. You think you'll get away with this? I didn't do anything, I replied calmly. Victor did. I picked up my suitcase. Elaine tried one last attempt. You won't get a dime of ours in court. I looked at her over my shoulder. I don't need your money, I said softly. Victor gave me something better. They watched, helpless, as I walked to the door. One suitcase. One life. One future that finally belonged to me. Mrs. Peterson watched from her porch as I loaded the suitcase into my car. When our eyes met, she nodded once, quiet approval. As I drove away, I didn't look back. Not once. Victor's final gift was more than financial security. It was freedom. It was clarity. It was a rebirth. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the world open around me, wide, alive, waiting. Just like Victor said. A beginning.